Alrighty, this could be a fairly lengthy process, so I'm just gonna try to go through this as quickly as I can while still covering all the main points. Here we see, this is just the board of pecan wood that I purchased. It has the general outline of the Keyblade with a few of the design points on it. The board is pecan wood and it's 8 inches across, so that was the main thing that was limiting the shape and size of the Keyblade. And I made sure to put all my measurements out in pencil first because the wood is very expensive. I want to make sure I make all the cuts properly. And this wood is extremely heavy, and the ideal thickness for a board you want to get when making a Bokken is probably 1 inch in thickness. However, these boards I got were 1.75 inches, and so it allowed me to make some more designs that were more three-dimensional. However, having to thin the boards back down to 1 inch was fairly challenging, and we'll talk about that later. Okay, in this next picture you've seen, I've used a saber saw to cut out the general shape of the Keyblade. And this saber saw I used was much too weak to be using on such thick, tough boards. So I had a really tough time with that. I had to like put all of my weight into pushing the saw through the wood, and basically I could only cut through like 1 millimeter per second with this. It was very difficult, and I almost killed myself several times because the blade would get caught in the wood and shake the tool around like crazy. So I think when I start my next projects, I'm probably going to get a different saber saw first that's more powerful. For more simple cuts, you might use like a table saw or something, which is much more, would be much safer. But because of the complex shape on this, I needed the mobility of the saber saw. But I don't know. We'll just play it by ear. Okay, so here you see how I've drilled some holes into the board, and this is so I could cut out the negative space that exists between the handle and the guard. And while this was very difficult to do, I wanted to have the entire Keyblade be just one solid piece of wood because it would make it tougher, and while it would kind of make some of the crafting process very difficult, and because like how do you shape the in-between parts, you know what I mean? But I did this because I wanted it to be one solid piece, and otherwise I would have to like kind of fit together different pieces of wood and glue them together, and I just don't really trust how tough that would be, because the finished project is meant to be used in full contact sparring should somebody choose to do that. So I just went through the trouble of having it be one piece. Okay, in this image I've marked up in pencil how I'm going to reduce the thickness of the blade, and basically it's gonna reduce the thickness to about 1 inch. At the base of the blade it's 1.25 inches, and at the tip it's gonna be 1 inch, because you kind of want the blade to taper a bit to reduce the weight, and this is how actual swords are. They're gonna be like thinner at the tip than they are at the base. And I'd say this is like actually thinning out the boards was the most difficult part because I didn't have the right tools. And here you see the results of my thinning out the boards. This was really difficult because what I did was I used a Dremel bit called a high speed cutter. I think it was like 151, something like that. And this bit was just the right amount of like, it wasn't like too rough and it wasn't too weak. It was just about right. I think the bit was still a little too. I wish the cutting bit were longer so that I could get more wood at the same time. And this part just took forever. It was so difficult. I almost killed myself so many times. And when you're thinning out a board, you want to use something else. Like I guess a lot more different people would probably use a wood plane. However, a power like a wood plane table kind of forces you to flatten the entire piece that you're working on. And on my Keyblade, I wanted to leave different sections at different thickness, so that would have been too difficult. There are a lot of other methods of thinning out a board, so I just used this Dremel bit mostly, and then I used a Stanley Surfform rasp. Uh, Before I started using power tools on my woodworking, this was the only thing that I used. And see, it's basically a giant cheese grater for wood. And while it gives you a lot of fine control, it's very strenuous work. Uh, in the future, I did purchase a wood plane, which I think will make this a lot easier. I haven't gone to try to use it yet, but this is going to be much more ideal compared to the dangerous power tools and the kind of weak surfform rasp. So I'm looking forward to trying this out later. All right, in this image, I have thinned out the teeth section of the key a little more, and I've put a bevel on the round edge just to give it a nice look. And here this is how I shape the front edge of my Bokken. I cut out a hexagonal bevel first, and then I'm going to curve the front edge, because for Bokken they have to have curved edges for when two blades make contact. You want the wood to crush instead of chip, and if you have corners, it breaks the wood very easily. So that's why you have rounded edges. I forgot to take a picture of the rounded edge, like when I was doing it, but on the right side you can see the rounded edge on the finished product. Okay, in this set, I am thinning out the handle and the guard section, and this was very difficult to do because there are still raised sections in the cross guard and then in the pommel of the Keyblade, and these parts prevented me from using the rasp for doing much shaping or flattening out the wood. So this was very difficult and actually a little bit dangerous. So what I did was I switched over to a paper sanding bit for my Dremel. And these things are pretty fantastic for smoothing and shaping. I was really surprised at how well they worked. But they are actually made of paper, which makes them extremely dangerous because eventually they wear out. And since they're spinning so fast, they will fly apart at like 300 miles an hour. And I've had these things like fly at me, and I have a cut on the back of my left hand. And on a different occasion, one like flew and hit me in my face and left a cut in my right cheek. So yeah, power tools can be extremely dangerous. Please, please, please wear goggles when you're using power tools, especially Dremels. If one of these things had hit me in the eye, I would be instantly blinded. So yes, please wear goggles. In my case, I actually did get a set of work goggles, but but sawdust just got into my eyes anyway. I had so much sawdust in my eyes, so I ended up just going to a pool equipment store, and I got swimming goggles instead because those are airtight. And you kind of want your goggles to be airtight when you're working with power tools, because all the the air like rushing around the place, it causes the sawdust to just go every direction, anywhere. And if there's any opening in your goggles, it will get in somehow. So get swimming goggles, which is a little unusual, but do that. Okay, so here you see the results of my using the sanding bits, and compared to the texture before, it is smooth now. Looks nice. And I've also added the bevel on the inner curve of the guard. This is to keep the guard from interfering with the motion of your hands as much. and it is fairly comfortable to hold as soon as I added this bevel. So I was really proud of this design working out pretty well. In this image, I've cut in the notches for the teeth of the Keyblade. I used the Dremel bit to kind of cut out square notches, and I used an iron file in order to kind of clean it up and make it look really square. I wanted to avoid doing anything too complex with the teeth because I know if it got too thin or I did too much to it, it would make this section of the Keyblade very fragile. It'd be too thin, and even as it is, I'm sure if somebody were to use this thing in a full contact sparring match, if the teeth were to ever be hit, they would just break off immediately. So it is still pretty much an art piece. Okay, so I forgot to do the in-between parts of this, but this is like from the final product. I did engravings of the Kingdom Hearts logo on both sides of the blade. It's just a heart with a crown on it, and on the bottom I used an engraving bit in order to carve in the name of this Keyblade. Okay, this is the keychain decoration. Basically, I just took a scrap piece of wood, and then I used Dremel and went to town and made a round shape out of it. And I left it attached to a base so that I could easily keep it clamped down while I worked on it. I didn't want to hold this thing in my hand because that would be very dangerous. Alright, and on the left you see kind of the finished shape. I haven't smoothed it out or anything like that. Forgot to take in between progress pictures of it, but basically I smoothed it out and I drew in a face, and I carved it out with an engraving bit on the Dremel. And I did take a black marker and kind of fill in the face. I kind of regret doing that because it doesn't quite look as natural, but it does help the face stand out a little more. But I'm pretty happy with the way it turned out. So I attached the keychain decoration to the pommel of the Keyblade using some things that I got from some craft stores and hardware stores. While it does look really nice, I find that when you're swinging the Keyblade around, the keychain just interferes a lot with your motions. It just feels really weird. So just be aware of that. So the things I used, so I used some brass screw eyes, and I fit those into some finishing washers just so it doesn't look so hokey. And I connected them together with a gold colored chain. Okay, in this image you see some of the finished geometries of the Keyblade. I really like the handle section, and this is how the teeth look like from the back. It is flat instead of rounded because, it's not really supposed to be a cutting edge. Like on all Keyblades, the cutting edge is supposed to be the flat back of the key. Alright, in this shot you can see the logo engraving again, and you can see that the back edge is just flat. I could have chosen to bevel this to reduce the weight a little more, but I just figured it was good enough as it is. And here you can see a comparison shot of how the project started out as just being a wood board, and then the finished product at the bottom. I forgot to log the part where I did the oil finish on the Keyblade. I used 2 coats of tung oil, and on the first coat I did wet sanding with 600 grit. I probably should have used 400 grit because it just works better for wet sanding. You don't want to use too high of a grit for wet sanding. But yeah, so I did 2 coatings, let those dry, and that's why the wood is a lot darker when it's finished compared to how it is when it's raw. So I'm fairly happy with how the project turned out. The geometry worked out pretty well. It got a lot lighter when I thinned it out, and my sister seems pretty happy with the Keyblade. All of her friends really like it. That's cool. But yeah, I'm glad it looks nice, and it feels really practical when you're using it, aside from the Keyblade keychain thing just swinging around. while you're trying to use it. But I had a lot of fun working on this project. It took 2 whole months. The whole time I was learning a lot about how to use power tools, how to avoid safety hazards. I hurt myself a lot, lost a lot of blood, but it was all worth it. I had a lot of fun. It turned out pretty good, and hopefully I'll be able to work on all kinds of different stuff in the future. But yeah, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the making of this Keyblade Bokken, and I'll see you around. You guys have a good day. Bye.